you'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosna. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the Career Equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Career Equation podcast. Today, I'm excited to be with Ollie Thorn. Ollie is an expert on resilience, culture, and diversity. He's a speaker, advisor, and consultant. And like myself, he's navigated life with a spinal cord injury, and he brings that expertise into everything that he does. He's had a diverse range of career adventures across the army, professional sport, the third sector, and big business. And he's here today to discuss the experience of reinvention, this time brought about by a very exciting new chapter in his life. A warm and friendly welcome to you today, Ollie.
Hi, Erica. Yeah, thanks for having me here today.
So tell us a bit about your exciting new chapter. What's prompted reflections and changes right now in your career?
So earlier on this year, on the 25th of January, I welcomed my son to the world, which was absolutely incredible and something. Actually, after I sustained a spinal cord injury, I was really scared that I wasn't going to be able to experience that kind of amazing thing of fatherhood. So it's something for me that really made me reflect and want to challenge myself to make sure I was kind of making the most of that amazing opportunity.
Manager hack. When your talent experience a major life event, the world shifts on its axis. Things that mattered a lot before may not matter at all now, and new priorities and needs come into focus. Taking the time to connect in about these new perspectives is crucial. Whether it's return after a life-changing accident or injury, a birth, adoption, death, we bring our whole selves to work. What's going on outside of work is important to us. And as employers, we can best support and nurture our people if we stay close to what is live for them. That's why career conversations are so important, because even if we're not cognizant of big changes in our colleagues' inner lives, taking time to connect prevents us from missing out on something that may have moved for them on the chessboard of life. Many congratulations and many, many sleepless nights ahead of you as well. But that's wonderful news. And of course, as anyone listening to this who's become a parent will know, as my husband often says, in fact, babies have very big elbows. They're really amazing and making themselves absolutely clear that they should be the top priority in your life. And I know that's brought about some reflections for you around your own career. You've had quite a few interesting chapters and evolutions, and you're now thinking about another. So can you give our listeners a little bit of an intro, about where you've been and your career life cycle so far?
Yeah, absolutely. At the beginning of my career, I had every intention to stay in that career for a long time. I started training as an officer in the military, and very abruptly, that all changed overnight when I was involved in a motorcycle accident, which left me with a spinal cord injury. And there's very few role models with a disability. And at the time I was injured, the only role models I could really see in life were Paralympians or people that were reliant on the state, or like a James Bond villain, for example, right? And I naturally kind of chased that Paralympic dream because that was the one area that I saw that kind of had a bit of opportunity, and was lucky enough to be supported into alpine ski racing, which I absolutely loved, and kind of let me re-identify myself through my physicality again. Ultimately, I wasn't good enough to make the Paralympics, and I suppose that led me to kind of question what was important to me. And what was important to me was kind of be able to use the skills I'd learned and the experience I'd had to hopefully improve other people's experience of life, and specifically spinal cord injury at that time. So I went into the charity sector and then ended up transitioning in the charity sector from services side to fundraising. And then I ended up actually transitioning into the world of big corporates to try and kind of demonstrate value to doing something better. And I've worked in a couple of different roles in the big corporate space.
and you're now stepping out as an independent for the first time. So you're thinking about running similar work perhaps, but in a different setup in terms of your work, being freelance, working for yourself. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges I realized when you're talking about the elbows babies have was that challenge that that I know every parent talks about, which is time and being able to bring the energy that you want to being a parent, to work, to kind of potentially hobbies, if you still have any time for hobbies whatsoever. But I suppose it's being able to turn up with the right energy. And I suppose I saw this as an opportunity to make a step that I've been thinking about taking for a while. And I knew if I didn't take it now, I wouldn't take it at all. And ultimately, I wanted to have that sustainability with time to be the dad that I wanted to be, but then also still to continue that kind of pursuit of a successful, in inverted commas, career. And I suppose like using those experiences that I've got across multiple different areas, from kind of going through extreme trauma to kind of working in different arenas, from professional sport through to third sector to kind of big footsie businesses. Yeah, like you say, around that areas of resilience and I suppose leadership qualities of how to build higher performing teams. And then also kind of really pushing into that real passion area of mine, which is disability inclusion. With 24% of the working age population with a disability, we should be doing a little bit more within business to better support people.
Thank you, Ollie. I didn't realize that it was a quarter of us navigating a disability in the working population. That's a much larger number than I had expected, actually. And so let's talk about your question, because I ask everyone to bring a kind of careers conundrum with them. So tell us about what's on your mind right now so we can understand a bit better about what you're up to.
So my question will be, how do I make sure I can still remain sustainable, both with time and financially within my new venture?
Brilliant. Well, let's see what the career equation can give you in terms of pinpointing how you spend that time and energy to really make sure that you get this business to lift off. Now, for those who are encountering the equation for the first time, let me just give a really brief summary. What the equation says is that there are basically 4 different components to a fulfilling and thriving career. And the more that we can pinpoint what these are for us, the easier it will be for us to go and get them, or to amplify them, or to make use of them in our working lives. The first is it's important to play to an area of skill or strength, finding your natural disposition and really working towards spending time getting better and better using those skills. The second is that you add in something you feel strongly about, so something you care about. We call this passion, but anything that gives you pleasure and energy. And the third is to combine your skills and your passions to get a result, an impact, we say in the equation, that's meaningful for you, a way that you define success personally and professionally. And the last variable is that we say that all of those things can be enhanced or compromised by the environment that you put yourself in. And environment at work and in our careers can be everything from working environment itself, an office, working outdoors. It can be how much freedom and space we have, levels of autonomy. It can be how we are employed, whether we're independent, self-employed, whether working for a big PLC. What we do, where we travel loads, work from home, have great IT, wonderful coffee, anything else really that is about the environment that helps you be at your best. So some of what we're going to be doing today, Ollie, is to really unpick where do you do your best work and how do we support you in that. So to get us started, we asked for 4 moments, each related to different aspects of the equation. And we're going to kick off with your first one. I'm going to ask you about a moment in your life where you realized that you had a natural skill for something.
A moment in my life I realized I had a natural skill. I suppose for me, it was after I sustained a spinal cord injury, and going through that huge trauma is very isolating and it's incredibly scary. And I was incredibly lucky to have incredible support through my rehab and through the NHS, and then actually through the military afterwards, kind of onto that kind of further journey. And I suppose that desire to kind of want to support others through my experiences really showed me that I had an ability to build relationships and build trust with people going through those kind of really stressful situations quite quickly. And I remember when I first started working for a charity called Backup, one of their services to actually go into hospitals. And I worked in a couple of hospitals in Sheffield and Wakefield spinal injury unit. And I remember going into Sheffield spinal injury unit and going upstairs to the kind of complex care units where people are still kind of on bed rest or in those first early stages of getting in a chair. And speaking to people that we weren't from a similar background, but we were kind of bonded through that experience of spinal cord injury, and being able to give them direction and support, and hearing back from those very small conversations, but months later, kind of be able to go back and visit that hospital 3, 6 months, 9 months later, and having those people come up to me and tell me about that kind of ability, well, the confidence I've been able to kind of inspire within them to be able to kind of take those steps to leave hospital, right? To be able to go home and take those kind of first scary steps into living with a spinal cord injury.
It's no small feat to be able to help people. That feels like something that might currently be unbearable is bearable. And not just that you can go beyond that into a continued experience of an exceptional life. I think that's a very generous skill set, but it's also not an easy starting position in terms of coaching, motivation, inspiration. What is it about you that makes you particularly good at that, do you think? And does any of this draw from your military background or maybe even earlier in your life than that? I'm curious to know a little bit more about the origin story of this. Where does it come from?
I've reflected quite a lot on this, and I'm not entirely sure, but I think there are definitely certain elements that I can pull on. And I think my experience of going through trauma, and not just a spinal cord injury, I've had some people that I've lost within my immediate family due to mental health, and kind of those experiences together have made me really explore my own kind of journey and my own feelings, and the way I have approached trauma, and acknowledging different emotions that I've had at different points. When I was first injured, I was incredibly good at putting everything in a jar and putting it on the top shelf and never touching it again emotionally. And that's how I dealt with it. But I had to be willing to kind of take that jar off the shelf and really explore it. And I think by exploring and kind of going deep into that, it kind of gave me the ability to kind of see other perspectives from different points of view. And I suppose develop empathy and the ability to listen and ensure people genuinely feel like they're heard and they are heard, right? And kind of talking about their experiences. I think everything, no matter what anyone's experience, is relative. So it's how can you really understand their perspective. And I think also when I was lying in a hospital bed, I built those relationships, I suppose, faster with people that had a similar experience. But I do think there's a lot that can be drawn and taken into other experiences, right? And I've definitely taken a lot of those learnings into building that team around us when we're in the sports environment, or actually kind of how do we galvanize a story that we want to tell within charity fundraising, or how do we again look at that cultural perspective and how do we get that culture of belonging that we need within companies to really kind of develop that performance. I think there's so much that we can take from that into those other learnings.
There's a lot of transferability, which is exactly some of what you're going to be doing and have been doing already successfully to navigate all the different environments in your history. So let's talk a little bit then about things that give you pleasure, enjoyment, energy, because it strikes me from your career history that you're someone who is interested in a lot of different things and, gets a lot of oomph from making stuff happen. So can you tell us a little bit about a passion story, a time when you really knew that you loved what you were up to?
Yeah, I suppose at this current point in life, keynote speaking is something that I absolutely love doing. And it really combines a number of things that I really enjoy. And that is definitely helping others. And I suppose using my own lived experiences to benefit people in a number of different areas. But also it combines that with the kind of similar buzz and excitement that I used to get from kind of sports. I think it's very rare in life that we can step into a state of flow. And for me, that state of flow is actually when you're not having to think about, or you're not thinking about anything else. You're just kind of reacting and you're kind of going with it because it's so well drilled. And we used to talk about it in ski racing, that actually, if you thought when you're approaching a corner, oh, I need to turn now, actually you're too late and you're not racing as fast as you can, right? Your body needs to just react. And sometimes you get to the bottom of the run and your best runs were the ones that you couldn't even remember because you were so absorbed in that actual moment. And I suppose keynote speaking kind of gives me the nervous kind of tingle beforehand, where you want to really kind of make sure that you're prepared and you kind of done all the groundwork as much as you can to get yourself to the point. And then when you're on the stage and you're delivering, it's that state of flow, right? It's down to you. You have to perform. There's nowhere to kind of really hide. And then there's that elation, right? There's that high, there's that buzz afterwards. And I think, that those combinations of that similarity for me are finding that state of flow and that kind of buzz from sport, but also the far deeper, more meaningful kind of aspects of actually what difference are we actually making as people at having to use my experience to kind of support others, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like this. This telling of the performative moment as a kind of comparison to sports training. That's really interesting. It's like you work and 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 you hone something, you practice it, and then you stand on the stage, or you stand at the start line, and that's the moment. That's the moment in which all the hard work comes together and you have that wonderful experience of whatever it is, boinging down the hill, or, half an hour of holding captivated attention to deliver value, or an extraordinary gymnastic moment. Are there any particular standout keynotes or talks that you've done that have been really memorable?
I'm pausing because I'm trying to think of one quickly, but I think there's probably two examples that I think are particularly captivating for me. And I think the first one of which was about a year ago when I was at a charity fundraising event. And I suppose be able to use my story to kind of share the impact that a charity had had, but also to try and inspire people in the room to understand the value of where their money was going to go if they were going to be able to donate. And that night, creating a kind of a record amount of money raised, it was nearly £400,000 on the night, was absolutely incredible. To be able to be a small cog in that event made me incredibly proud. And I think from a business point of view, there isn't, I suppose, one that jumps out, but the ones that I particularly enjoy are working with organizations around that disability inclusion piece. That's something that I do particularly enjoy and is particularly close to my heart. As I mentioned, 24% of the working age population have a disability, and often companies have numbers of people who share that they have a disability is like kind of within the single digits or even under 5%. And I've worked with a number of companies now that have kind of gone through that kind of storytelling that I've been lucky enough to be involved with. And over a year, I've seen those kind of internal numbers really, really transform and go from single digits right up over kind of 15%. And that's not been down to kind of hiring. It's actually about how do they change that culture to help people to feel safe and understand the reasons why they might want to talk about a disability, but also changing that kind of overall mindset of the negative perception of disability within society at large, right? It's not just within the workplace, it's definitely within society at large. I certainly remember when I was first injured lying in a hospital bed, and kind of I didn't realize how negatively I thought about disability until I was thinking about that on myself, right?
That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's also really, really helpful just in terms of awareness raising about what employers can do to create an environment of psychological safety where people can really participate and share the adjustments, the support that they need to do great work, which is ultimately what we all come to work to do a great job. And let's talk about impact then, because one of the key moments in the equation, the key points, is being able to know, what am I measuring when I talk about a successful and meaningful life? I wanted to help us understand that better for you. So let's go again into a specific moment where you knew that what you were doing actually mattered.
For me, I suppose the most tangible kind of story around impact is going to be going back to the work that I do within the charity sector. So I still sit on the board of a international humanitarian charity that works with people with disabilities in areas of conflict, disaster and poverty. And they're called Humanity Inclusion. And for me, that's definitely the clearest way that you can really kind of see that impact. And last year, I flew out to Uganda to kind of see one of the projects that we work on in action. And I remember feeling incredibly nervous before I flew to Uganda for all of those kind of what if moments that I was thinking about, traveling to Uganda, going to a refugee settlement in a wheelchair as a full-time wheelchair user and kind of with a disability. Would I be able to access anything? Would I be pulling in too many resources that should be used on the ground? Like all of those kind of natural questions that someone would have. And someone took me aside and said, actually, there are so many people with a spinal cord injury or different disabilities that are, living within this camp that actually it's going to be kind of really supportive for them to actually see other people not within the camp that have disabilities and are able to kind of share their stories. But also for me to be able to tell that story kind of what I was able to experience when I got back. And one of the things that I've never thought of before was some of these refugee settlements. So the one that I visited in Uganda, it's called a settlement and not a camp because it's been there for 20 years because it's built for people from Rwanda and they haven't been able to go back into country. So one of the main causes of injuries and disability is actually road traffic accidents because of the kind of area there and how that kind of infrastructure is set up. And we met someone who was an amputee, and if they had the same injury within the UK, they would have not been an amputee, but because of the medical support structures, they went straight to amputation. Quite a kind of drastic step and change for that individual. And in the UK, prosthesis is incredibly expensive and very complicated. And the charity Humanity Inclusion are now using quite innovative technology. We're using 3D printers. So people are actually able to, we're actually able to take the 3D printing machine to different areas of the country, which is quite groundbreaking. And also we're able to just scan their stump and be able to print a new prosthesis on the ground in region. So we're able to kind of be far more reactive, but also do it far more sustainably. We're able to dramatically drop the costs, produce replacements if needed. And the impact of that to be able to allow these individuals to be able to go back and actually support their families again and not be that kind of classic burden, or in inverted commas, on their families and immediate support groups is phenomenal. And this particular individual had 3 children and had been relying on his wife going out and trying to find work. And the next day after getting this prosthesis fitted, he was able to go back into employment and start work again. So just incredible seeing that instantaneous kind of journey that someone kind of goes down and the support that's able to be provided in different contexts. So yeah, when we talk about impact for me, yeah, we can talk about kind of workplace impacts and things like that. But for me, kind of seeing those kind of really monumental stories is hard to top on that kind of impact story.
For sure, yeah. And I hear it's sort of a kind of a golden thread through what you share, that these pivotal moments where you create an opportunity for someone to move forward because of something that you've been party to, something you've contributed to, those are the things that sort of get you out of bed at, 100 miles an hour, right? Just kind of really give you the energy and the focus and the determination, the creativity to make good things happen. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And let's talk then about environments, because actually this is a bit of the other side of the question. That kind of other side of this is, instead of asking you about what environments you love, we actually ask you about, have there been environments, situations, moments where you felt that you were almost sabotaged or it became impossible for you to be at your best?
Absolutely. I say it so quickly because it's something that, Eric, I'm sure you'll understand, right? Having a spinal cord injury and having a disability, there are so many challenges that come with that. And some challenges are easy to see straight away, and others kind of are a bit more hidden, and I suppose more known by those that have a disability. And for me, I suppose those challenges fall into 2 distinct areas of living with a disability. The first of which is just the challenges of the environment. A lot of the clients I work with work in London. I have offices in London that I need to get to. Getting in and out of London as a full-time wheelchair user is a nightmare, right? Like from kind of not really having any disabled parking bays at train stations to the nightmare, that moment on rush hour where the train doors open and the train's full and I'm sitting on the platform, I look at them in the same way they look at me, right? Like this is going to be such an awkward moment of me trying to get on the train. Everyone's feeling rubbish. No one feels good about it. All the way through to potentially there not being a ramp to get off the train, to, like you said, right, the nightmare on pavements, all the challenges with tube stations, right? And the lack of accessibility on tube stations, or my particular favorite is when it's raining, trying to hail a cab is a nightmare because not many cabbies like to get out to get the ramp down. So nearly 99.9% of carriers would drive straight past, and I can't hail a cab at all. But yeah, not wanting to turn this into an absolute kind of negative conversation. But yeah, so one of the things I do to kind of get around it is I end up driving most places, to be honest. So I know pretty much where all the disabled bays are around London, and we'll just have to schedule time in to allow me to do that, or wake up particularly early to get up before the traffic. So yeah, the first one being environment, the second one of which being society's perception of disability. And this is, I suppose, is very nuanced, but I think it is definitely improving and going in the right direction. But society's perception of disability is horrendously bad, and there's no 2 ways about it. And I mentioned it earlier when I was lying in my hospital bed and kind of looking for role models, there was a real lack of role models living a normal, inverted commas, life, right? There's complete lack of people living with a family or kind of successful in workplace with a disability. There are the real extremes out there. And I think we're getting better by having more people involved in the kind of media and kind of being able to tell stories that way. But I could immediately see, like a light switch, how differently people spoke to me before I was injured to when after I was injured. And there's a number of ways that people approach you in those different settings, but it can be awkward, right? And you can know it can kind of remove you from kind of like different opportunities, and people instantly judge you because I have a label, right? That is a wheelchair, and people will make an assumption of what I'm capable of or why I'm in the room, all of those other things before I have the opportunity to even say anything. And I know that's a label that Black people, struggle with. It's a label that women have struggled with. It's a label that anyone from an underrepresented background has really struggled with. But yeah, one I suppose I didn't appreciate before I had an injury, right? I didn't really kind of understand that large perspective. But yeah, it's that label and the perceptions that others have on me, right? You have to be able to work out strategies to quickly break through that and build a rapport with an individual outside of that label, and often kind of fight biases on the way.
Yeah, it's that label and the perceptions that others have about me. You have to be able to work out strategies to quickly break through that and build rapport with an individual outside of the label and kind of fight the biases along the way. Do you want to give us a specific example of that? You don't have to, but you could.
I think like specific example would be, so I'm 6'3". I was in the military beforehand as a boxer. So I was tall in a group. I'd be able to kind of look over a bit of a crowd and kind of navigate through a crowd. And since being in a wheelchair, I've actively chosen with my new wheelchair that I'm kind of sat in right now to not have handles in that chair, because I've been in kind of group context before, in work context as well, where we've been talking in a group and someone has come up behind me and grabbed hold of my wheelchair to move me into another position without asking, without anything like that, just because there's just this perception they're allowed to kind of come up and move me, right? Would someone have ever kind of come up behind me and picked me up and turned me around and removed me from the conversation beforehand, right? Absolutely not. And I think there's always the classic line of people will look at me with absolute pity, or it's kind of very regular that the kind of second question that someone will ask will be, how are you in a wheelchair? What happened to you? What happened to your injury? And as people, I know we are all always inherently curious of what is different and what we don't see regularly. But I think there's a need to understand that asking questions like that, actually, you are just likely asking that person to step back into an element of trauma and kind of like open up to something that's very personal to them. And I suppose it's just that lack of awareness and being clumsy-footed in those kind of footsteps in how people speak and work with you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I personally, obviously, I really relate to everything you said about both the physical environment and the sort of impacts on our inner world, as well as navigating the relationships around disability. One of the things I find quite interesting is sort of general lack of just visibility of people with disabilities that you see out and about in the world. And also the understanding that many disabilities are invisible. And how do you generate awareness and sensitivity that there's someone in front of you might be going through an immense amount of pain and discomfort, but you can't see that, you don't know about it. And I really relate to this idea of how people treat you. I remember walking into, I think it was a bakery or something, and I came in, slowly with my sticks. It was quite slippery that day, and I was still like really quite wobbly. It was quite early on. And the first person that came up to me said, "Oh, don't fall over." Like, I know you mean well. I know that what you're saying has come from a well-intentioned place. It's just, you're trying to do your best to say something that's helpful. You've noted that things are difficult for me, but do you know how much effort is going into my body right now not to fall over? Like, it's pretty much the only thing that I'm focusing on. It's not like something I haven't noticed is a problem. It's not like you're pointing it out for the first time. And it's not something you pointed out that I hadn't been a bit sensitive to, So yeah, while people often mean well, sometimes the way in which they deliver that intention to be helpful, it can feel quite patronizing, make me feel quite small, or indeed just quite triggering and annoying. And the other thing is that people are always asking, like, how did the accident happen? How did that happen? Sometimes I'm quite up for telling that story, but other times just being able to respond with, why do you want to know? Is helpful for generating insight on both sides.
So I'm just going to say and just add to what you said, right? 80% of people who have a disability have a hidden disability, right? So the absolute majority have a hidden disability. And I think the majority of those are choosing to actively hide that, right? From those kind of communities they're in, because they know they're going to be treated actively differently, right? Because that's what they witness and see on a daily basis. So how do we create that kind of culture where people feel like they can bring it if they want to bring it? And how can we kind of ensure that we're supporting people to be best they can, so ultimately they improve productivity, right? And all of those kind of bring it back to that kind of corporate speak, right? So it's more relatable. But that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is how do we improve all of those other elements for organizations?
So on the back of that, we're going to start putting something together for you that will hopefully allow you to really strongly articulate the values you're bringing, and to help us answer the question of how do we make the most of your focus, your time, to get to where you want to go in your next chapter. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build a career equation for you. And we can do that by you filling in the gaps of a few little sentences I'm going to give you. And the first one I'm going to ask you for is your name.
Ollie.
Yep. Well done. You're a winner. So Ollie, is the beginning of the equation. And now I'm going to ask you, will use my skills in, right? So now if you're going to choose 2 or 3 key things, reflecting back on the conversation we've had, what do you think are the killer skills that you get great joy from using over and over?
So use my skills in the sense of building relationships, making impact. It would be creating better environments for all.
I wonder if we want that in your impact.
Well, there's something around like sustainable change, right? So the only way you can create change, in my opinion, I love the charity sector, but the only way you can like truly create change is by evidencing income and profit to it, right? Essentially, and like productivity is like how you create that change. So it's use my skills to build impactful relationships, to show the performance improvements to the culture of belonging. That doesn't sound right.
So we've got skills, passion, and impact. And I want you to have 1 or 2 things in each of those. But I'm wondering actually if you've already, some of the bits have already fallen out of it.
I've already gone jump the gun.
So let me play this back to you. And you tell me, we might need to add some things. We might need to play around with it. So let's see. I will use my skills in building impactful relationships and my passion for creating better environments to evidence the value of a culture of belonging. And my passion for creating. Okay, let me ask again. So my passion for, what kind of passions have you heard yourself speak about that really stand out?
My passion for the power of storytelling to create better environments.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm going to create better environments and evidence the value of a culture of belonging. And evidence the value of a culture of belonging. And then environmentally, let's turn it on its head. How do you do your best work? And you're going to fill in gaps around an environment that is what supports you to be your best work.
An environment that is, the immediate words that jump out would be like the environment that is accepting and that is conscientiously curious. I think that kind of sums it up, right? Like an environment that is adaptable and conscientiously curious. I think like the adaptability is for me around, yes, that accessibility piece, if I were to be going in and working and things like that, but also the willingness to be conscientiously curious is not asking the question straight away of actually, how have you been injured before you even kind of know my name? But it's the want to learn and improve, but doing it in a way that understands that we're all people and we have different layers that you need to work through.
Beautiful. Okay, lovely. So I'm going to play it back in full. And you tell me if we missed anything. I, Ollie, will use my skills in building impactful relationships and my passion for the power of storytelling to create better environments and evidence the value of a culture of belonging. An environment that is adaptable, accepting, and conscientiously curious works best for me.
Love it.
So to what extent is it news? Do you feel like you already knew all of that? Or has it been useful in particular to hone it down in the way we've just done?
I suppose it's a mission statement in a way, right? I think I probably knew all like those elements, but it's that honing it down into a mission statement, almost that corny way of I'm looking up to the wall, of like having it stuck on the wall, right? Because it's the ability to use it to make decisions against, in a sense of like, does it, when something comes in or a decision needs to be made, it's like, actually, am I sticking to those values in a sense of like, does it fit to what I want to be and where I want to go?
Exactly. We call it a North Star in Career Matters. The career design is a North Star. It's like, this is who I am and the direction I want to take. And it ought to be kind of above your desk, as a sense check, because time is short and focus is important. So to go, this is who I am and what I bring. How does this activity line up with it? We say, this is a North Star. This is your high level vision. But there's kind of also like the first step, which is like, how do I begin to take an action to make this thing real? In our workshops, we call this the bird's eye view and the worm's eye view. So if we're going to score your work as it is right now, I know it's at an early stage, but in terms of like your vision for the future against this design, and you're giving it marks out of 10 at the moment, where would you put yourself right now in terms of living this?
Marks out of 10 out of my North Star. I'm probably quite renowned for being reasonably self-critical, but I'd probably be like a 4. Like very, very, very much an early days score. I think like happy in the initial steps, but definitely like there's just so much room for kind of growth and like really building on it. So yeah, really, really happy with those first steps. Otherwise I'd have probably been even a bit less than, but no, really, really happy with it. And I think there's just that amount of growth, right, that I kind of like see above.
You're beginning, you're clear at the beginning. There's nothing wrong with having a lower score when you're starting something. It just says there is space, there's room to grow, there's room to flourish, there is road to travel. And you know that. So if we're going to drill down into that question then, how do I really focus on the things that are going to enable me to move from 6 to 8 to 10 in the manifestation of this work? What do you think are going to be the key steps for getting this clarity? What are your next things that will make the biggest difference here? And so let's speak very specifically about you and your work now.
So the next steps I need to do is to concentrate on building a bit more of a website. So have a profile in an area where people can go to just learn a little bit about me without kind of reaching out and speaking to me directly. That's probably top of my list, but something I'm avoiding a little bit just because I know the amount of like time that's going to go into it to do it to kind of how I want to do it. And network, like it's the networking and keeping all of those relationships warm. Everyone knows how much time can be kind of spent on that, of kind of making sure that you are keeping up those relationships that you've spent a long time building. And I'm sure we'll all admit so many opportunities come from your network. So kind of really making sure that time and effort's into that network.
Networks. I was once told that your network is your net worth. Spending time staying connected to all the people who've been of interest or moved you, both at work and in your wider life and world, and perhaps taking an inventory of those people every so often, is a great way to reflect on who you are as a person, where you've been, and the influences that shape you. Whether you're thinking about making a career move, learning something new, or accessing support, staying live to this network, reaching out for their input, or reconnecting with those who have wisdom to share can be a rich source of insight. We do not exist alone, but as part of a rich web of social connection.
And then alongside, I suppose, the website, there's other aspects, like from my speaking, there's a show reel and things like that need to be put together. So it's like kind of an advert and a trailer for myself. That's already very much within the kind of oven at the minute. So kind of all the filming and stuff has been done. So just being edited at the minute. So yeah, I suppose for me, it's network, building a better kind of marketing platform, and then potentially working with a couple of speaker kind of agencies kind of things, which just need that show reel. They're all kind of been pretty warm, but just need that show reel for the next stop.
Great. It sounds like the stepping stones to where you want to get to, actually. You've already got quite a good idea of what they are, and you've started a number of them. So an invitation for me would just be, in terms of time management, is also to say there's a benefit in establishing some kind of rhythm to say, like, the 3 key pillars of your activity. So I'll spend this part of the day or the week on network. I'll spend this part on, say, getting the show reel over the line, and this spot of time on developing my proposition. And to what extent might that support you if you feel like each of these pillars are nudging forward each week, step by step?
You can probably see me smirking straight away as soon as you said that, because that's been something that I've said I should do from scratch, and those baby elbows have been far too good at getting involved at the minute. And that's definitely something I want to get in that rhythm of being like, right, okay, I have to dedicate X amount of time over a week, but also making sure I was spending the right amount of time on each of those to make sure you're kind of moving forward the whole time. I think it's very easy kind of when you step into that first step as my decision's main driver to make this, well, I say main driver, equal driver was my son, which is kind of the one that bumped me over to make sure I could have a little bit more time in this initial time. So I think it's been pretty easy to then fall into I've taken this step to be with my son for that kind of year. But then, by the end of the year, you're going to get to the end of the year and be like, I'm going to have to step back into some kind of like employment because I haven't actually made the most. Well, I've made the most of the time with the little one, but not made the moves forward that I need to work-wise. So the smirk was the same smirk I used to pull to my teachers, right? When they called me out on something I knew that I'd done wrong, right? That I need to definitely put focus on that.
And listen, here's my little invitation also about having a little person. Like, even if it's 10 minutes a day of commitment to each of these things, that might be all that is navigable, because like nappies and life are unpredictable right now. So building up slowly, but with a commitment to start that rhythm just might, help you get that focus in. And I think as someone who evidently has this tremendous amount of energy and loads of appetite for making things happen, that even if we just know there's a little spot of time going to each thing, and you still got to put your pen down and you still have to walk away after 10 minutes of networking on LinkedIn, that is still 10 minutes. And if you do it every day, as you know from your fitness stuff, of course, like, it's better to do small and little and often than to give yourself a hard time because you haven't got a 5-hour window, because that block of time just might not be available for you in your life right now. Of course, when that site is up, we're all going to go and check it out, right? Right, listeners? So last question, when you sleep back to yourself at that time when you'd had a catastrophic injury and you realized that it was going to be possible to use that to really support and enable others, what would you tell that version of yourself, speaking back from now to him?
So when you ask that question, I immediately, I suppose, jump back a step further, right? Like when I'm in that hospital bed and the days are long and the nights are dark, right? And I think there's an element of, it's tough, but it will get better. And I think there's that famous like Winston Churchill quote of like, if you're going through hell, don't stop, right? And I think it's just, what really helped me was looking at every day and finding out what I could do to make it a little bit better. But what's the one thing I would say to, I suppose, that next step point of being able to support people? Remember how it felt. I think remembering how it felt for me, right? I think that's the driver for me. Like, remember how it felt, and that powers everything.
I think remembering how it felt, yeah, that's the drive up for me. Like, remember how it felt, and that kind of powers everything. So if people want to hear your power in action, what are the best ways to hang out with Ollie Thorn or hire him to come and speak or consult with them? We'll put all of that in the show notes.
Best ways at the moment, LinkedIn. That's kind of where I'm most active. So yeah, Ollie Thorn, if you search me, hopefully I'll be one of the first ones that will pop up. LinkedIn's the main one, and websites soon to be coming. I'm announced on LinkedIn. You'd also be able to find me on Instagram and things like that, but the main one is definitely LinkedIn.
Great, brilliant. Listen, Ollie, thank you so much for sharing about your journey, about the next stage of this really exciting chapter in your life. And I just know that with all that you've got to give and bring, I'm really excited to see how we start moving from 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 over this next year. It's been really delightful to spend some time with you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success.
And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosna
And Zoe Schofield.
signing off.